Okay, I'll make a start. Today we are meeting on Lutruwita, Tasmanian Aboriginal land, sea and airways. Well, I am. And I'd like to acknowledge with deep respect the traditional owners of this land, the Palawa people, which I'm on today. I would like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and to the Aboriginal community that continues to care for the country. I stand for a future that profoundly respects and acknowledges Aboriginal perspectives, culture, language and history, and a continued effort to fight for Aboriginal justice, rights and paving the way for a strong future. I'm Darlene McLennan and I'm the Manager of the Australian Disability Clearinghouse in Education and Training. Thanks for joining us today. Today the topic is disability, higher education. Oh, sorry, I've got the wrong sheet here. Today's webinar is we're going to hear from two fellow people from the National Centre who are undertaking fellowships around disability, and the title is Supporting Students with Disability During and Beyond Higher Education. Before I introduce Professor Sarah O'Shea from the Centre to introduce our speakers today, I wanted to provide a few housekeeping items. The webinar is being live captioned by Bradley Reporting and is also being recorded. The recording will be on ADSET in the next few days. If you are requiring closed captions, you can click on the CC button either at the side or at the bottom of your screen. To increase the number of lines appearing in the caption box, click the small arrow on the top right-hand side of the caption box. If you have any technical difficulties today, you can email us at admin@adset.edu.au. The presentation will run for around 45-50 minutes, and at the end we will have some time for questions. If you'd like to put those questions into the chat box, and we encourage people to actually choose all panellists and attendees on the drop-down box there, because that means that we can actually have some conversations with each other throughout the presentation as well. Okay, so what I'd like to do now is introduce Professor Sarah O'Shea, who is the Director of the National Centre for Students in Equity in Higher Education, which is hosted by the Curtin University. And Sarah's going to introduce our speakers today. Over to you, Sarah.
Thank you. Thank you, Darlene. Hello and welcome to the first National Centre for Student Equity in Higher Education webinar. I too would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land that I'm sitting on, which is the Whadjuk Noongar people, and also pay my respects to elders past, present and future. I'm absolutely delighted today to be able to introduce two of our National Centre Fellows, Associate Professor Tim Pitnam and David Eckstein. Both Tim and David are joining our other four National Centre Fellows who are all studying and researching key areas of equity research in the higher education sector. For those of you who don't know, the National Centre is a body that is here to improve the higher education outcomes for marginalised and disadvantaged people through a variety of strategies. So some of the activities that the National Centre does include strengthening research in the field of educational equity, supporting the development of a robust evidence base, and also we work across the sector to enhance best practice within the equity field and work at policy level. Just to briefly touch on our two fellows that will be speaking today, Tim will be discussing his project, which is exploring how universities can best support people with a disability who are working through higher education and come from regional, rural and remote areas. Tim is a researcher of higher education policy at Curtin University, and his more broader research focuses on widening access and participation for groups of students historically underrepresented. Mr. David Eckstein works in the career field at Swinburne University, and his fellowship is entitled Meaningful Jobs for Graduates with Disability, From Luck to Business as Usual. His work will build upon Swinburne University's Accessibility Careers Hub, which provides targeted career support for students with a disability. And I know, like you, I'm very excited to hear about these two projects, and I know both Tim and David have a really exciting presentation for you today. So over to you both, and yeah, look forward to hearing about your work.
Thanks a lot, Sarah. Today I just want to start with an acknowledgement, because throughout this presentation David and I will be speaking in a lot of categorical terms, using the terms literally in categories. the government and universities record people with disability through various categories. And we both wish to acknowledge that the creation of categories is part of also the process of self-identification. How you categorise yourself and how others categorise you creates, in part, a sense of identity. Sometimes this categorisation is done by the person, but sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's done by a supportive group, sometimes it's done by society, and sometimes it's done by an impersonal or unfeeling organisation. I'm not wishing to problematise that or get into great discussion about it, merely to acknowledge that it's an issue, especially in the way that data are captured. And as I go through this presentation, as David then picks up and follows from me, we will be talking about categories, and the language we use reflects mostly the way in which the data are captured and the way in which people currently talk about disability in higher education. This is something we're highly aware of and we're very acutely aware of as we do our research. Furthermore, the categories that we'll be using are the ones that were up until this year used. Right now the government, the sector is changing how it categorises disability, but the categories we're talking about are the historical ones. Today I'm going to start talking about the area of research in general, and then I'm going to lightly touch upon and introduce my particular focus of my fellowship, and then I'll pass over to my colleague David, who will then continue with his. Certainly from my perspective, I'm not sitting here at the start of the fellowship telling you facts and telling you this is what is and this is what needs to be done. The reason we wanted to engage through the ADSET community through this webinar is to alert people that this is research we're going into, and we really want you to engage. People with disability with their lived experiences, practitioners, supporters, advocates, researchers. We want you to be aware of our research now so that you can start informing what we do and make sure that we're talking to the right people and asking the right questions. So to help set the scene and also to explain how these categories can be problematised, currently or up until this year, categories of disability were understanding these very broad themes, and this is the language they use: hearing, learning, mobility, vision, medical and other. And if we just look at 2 points in time, one 25 years ago, one of the earliest ever attempts to categorise disability in higher education, and we could see how proportionally these groups fell into higher education. And fast forward 25 years and we can see that these are dramatically changed. The main point I'm trying to make from this slide is to say that our understandings of disability, lived experiences is not a static thing, it changes. Also, in 1992, it was disability support officers who were doing the categorisation. Now we ask students to identify themselves, and that of course changes things. And what we've really seen is a rise in people identifying as having medical issues or other issues, and other is obviously very problematic because it's effectively saying otherwise not categorised. We need to have more refinement around that. This is the reason why at least there is a positive reason for categorising and counting, because certainly when it comes to institutions, whether that institution is a government or a higher education institute, it's only when you actually call something out, bring it to people's attention, make it visible, that you really start to have meaningful action around it. Starting with the good news and starting with the reason why we want to do further research into supporting students with disability. Over the last 10 years, we've just seen a massive increase in enrolments and participation for students identifying as having disability. It's more than doubled over the last 10 years. In 2009, it was a little over 30,000 students in the system, and at the last count, it was over 70,000. We need to look very carefully at the reasons for that. To what extent is this an actual increase in enrolments, in participation? To what extent is it better collecting, better reporting by institutions, and we're now actually identifying students that have always been there? And to what extent is it students for their own personal reasons being more comfortable or wanting to identify to the institution that they have disability? However, whilst participation has really increased, we're not seeing the same increase in other measures of success. I could show you dozens, but I just wanted to show you one because this says really what you need to know at this point, and that is that when we look at the national retention rate, that all critical first year of study, surviving beyond the first year of study, students with disability lag 3 to 4 percentage points behind the national cohort. So it's great that we're seeing more students in higher education, but we need to do more to support them. And that's very much one of the focus of my research. The other thing, again, that we want to look at closely, and again, talking about this problematic issue of categories, is this slide shows a completion rate. It took a cohort of students in 2005 and it waited for 9 years to take into account part-time enrolments, maybe interruptions to enrolments. And it said after 9 years, what percentage of that 2005 cohort completed their studies? And what it found was that overall, all students, national population, a little over 72%. Then when we start looking at these various categories of disability, we find that their rates are significantly lower. The exception is this category. And again, the language used by the department is visual. This is a reminder to us that we need to think more critically and more in a more nuanced way around how students define as disability and what they're saying and how these various forms of disabilities interact in the sector. The final slide that I want to show before passing over to David, because this introduced something that I'm particularly interested in, is going to be the focus of my research, is the intersection of disability and regionality. The small pie graph on the left just shows how many students in higher education have self-identified as having disability, and it's a tad over 6%. In this particular grab of data. When we look more closely at those students, what we find is of those 6%, only 0.5% of the whole national population were students with disability who would also be classified as from regional, rural or remote Australia. Now, just yesterday I received the updated data. I didn't update the slide because I want to look closely at it. I want to check it, but it does seem that that number has now gone up to over 1%, which is great. And again, in line with the overall increase in enrolments we're seeing from students with disability. But it is showing the double impact of the social and infrastructure barriers that students with disability in regional remote Australia face. So that's why I want to focus on that group of students, but I don't want to do it in isolation. And that's why I'm really excited to be partnering with David, because by working together, we can be looking at our own issues, not only in isolation, but in a unified way. And at that point, I want to pass over now to David. He'll introduce his slides. And David, just don't forget to tell me when you want me to change them.
Okay, thank you. Thanks so much, Tim. And thank you, everyone. It's very good to be with you. Thank you, ADSET, for this wonderful opportunity to speak with you. So my project looks in particular at the decisions that universities make in order to support the career development needs of students with disability. So this affects two things. It affects their engagement while they're at university, but more importantly, or as importantly, it also affects students' ability to transition to the workforce after they complete university. And these statistics that we're looking at here are an up-to-date snapshot that was taken at the time of my application for this fellowship. And there's no argument that students with disability suffer systemic discrimination when it comes to negotiating with and trying to enter the workforce. That is not disputed, but the reasons for that are complex. And this is the basis for my research project, is this experience of students with disability. I want to get to the main part in just a moment. But could I ask you now, because the responses are so varied, if you may, chat a quick response to this question: what do you feel is the biggest barrier for students with disability when it comes to getting meaningful work? And while you're thinking about that, I might remind you that the definition of meaningful work that I'm using is work that is related to the student's core discipline. Because we know from the statistics that students with disability, when they graduate, are more likely, if they get work, to be engaged with work that does not use the skills they obtained at university. And anecdotally, there's well, not just anecdotally, in the literature as well, there is a great deal of evidence that students with disability do not use their degree when it comes to getting work.
Sorry to interrupt, David. It's Darlene here. If people can just make sure they try to choose all panellists and attendees, because then we can all be a part of the conversation. Some people are just ticking all panellists. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
And not attendees. Thank you.
Thanks, Darlene. So, look, there's some very interesting chat coming through. Some specific skills are being mentioned. But things like stigma, bias and stereotyping, lack of understanding of opportunities, attitudes and cultural barriers, these are crucial things. And a very interesting comment there, an opportunity of just being given a chance. And I think these comments speak directly to the experience of people with disability. We know from the research into career development theory that there is tension between an individual's responsibility for getting work and the system that excludes them from being able to negotiate with the workforce and enter it. But our response to these tremendous comments that you're making, a deficit-based approach to thinking about people living with more than one disability, raise very complex engagement issues for students and for the workforce. And this is what the university can actually help with if it acknowledges the nature of the challenge that students with disability are being faced with. So maybe we can skip to the next slide, Tim. And there is just a brief acknowledgement there that tailored interventions do work. So look, we're going to present a poll for you in a moment, because again, there is no debate about this. We know that the specific programs that target the issues that students with disability need to face, specifically exclusion and imposed notions of disability, are very well addressed by targeted programs.
So Tim, did you want the poll put up now, or
could we wait for that just for a moment, Darlene? Thanks. Yep. That's David here. So we've I'm sorry, look, I've lost my gist. Could you bung the poll up there? Thank you. That'd be great. Because we know also that at last count, less than half of Australia's universities provide targeted support for careers with disability. So there's an interesting poll there that is not mine. Could we skip to the next one perhaps? I think that might be mine.
Sorry, Jane, I don't know if you heard that. It's Darlene here. If you could get to the next poll, sorry.
That's all right. So we're just interested to know.
Okay. So the poll question is, does your university pay for school-run programs to help students with disability get meaningful work? And the answers are yes, no, or don't know.
Terrific. So are we getting a trend in the results yet, Darlene, do you think?
I'm not able to see that. I don't know why, Jane, that I'm not seeing.
It's Jane here. If we could just wait just a couple of more seconds, we'll just see when it stops, and then I'll end the poll and we'll be able to see the results. Okay, I'm ending it now and sharing the results.
Okay.
So these are very interesting results.
Yeah. So David, if you could just read them out, or do you want me to read them out?
I beg your pardon. No, I'm sorry. I don't want to cut across you there. Please read them out.
Yep, so does your university or TAFE school run programs to help students with disabilities get meaningful work? Yes, 33% said yes, 30% said no, and 37% people said they don't know.
So I think the interesting thing about these results is that if we add the negative responses, and I would term don't know as a negative response, the vast majority of people essentially, if we translate this to the student population, don't have access to programs even if they exist. And that's another point that is picked up in the literature. Simply providing opportunities for people with disability doesn't automatically translate into them being able to access those things and receiving benefit from them. And so that trend, I feel, is reflected in the poll that we've just seen there. And we can go a little deeper and ask questions. If we do know that there are targeted programs being offered at our university, well, what kinds of programs are they? And I'd be grateful if you could chat me or chat the panel an example of the kinds of programs that are being run. And even if there are not any programs being offered by your organisation, what kinds of programs would you like to see being run? And I was going to step you through these questions one by one, but perhaps in the interests of time, we could do them in one hit. Take your pick of the questions. If you just want to answer one of them, that would be great. And let us know, in your opinion, what is it that prevents universities from providing more programs? It's not that they're a good idea. We know that they're a good idea. That's not the issue. But there are factors at work that prevent universities from providing targeted careers support for students with disability, and that's the focus of the research project that I'm working on. So, Darlene, do you mind if I speak to some of the chat that's coming through? I promise we made a pact before that I wouldn't talk for too long, so everyone, so I'm trying to stick to it, but do please pull me up if we need to move on.
No, I'm happy for you. Well, it's up to Tim as well. We want to give him equal fair time, so he's fine.
All right, thank you. So the kinds of things that are coming through are funding and resources as being offered as a response to this issue of what is it that prevents universities from providing more programs. And that's undeniably the case, I think. But some of the other responses we have to the first question or two are answers to those questions. You know, we know, or we all need to know about the terrific USEP program that the NDCO is ushering into the sector. You know, this is a marvellous opportunity to partner with a disability employment services provider. These are people that are skilled with working with people with significant career challenges. And because of the government funding model that they operate under, they come to the sector at little direct cost. So this is something we need to explore because there are other iterations of this kind of arrangement that are also very helpful. Swinburne partners with Wise Employment to provide a related kind of service. And at this stage, I want to be very careful to point out that that we need this variety. It's not that one iteration of a service is better than another. We know that students with disability, like the rest of us, need different modes of engagement and different options to choose from. And examples of things that work well are what we're after. So if you have contributions to make to this project, I'd be very pleased to hear from you when we survey the staff and the student population later on this year. There's also a couple of comments about a lack of understanding of how things operate, a lack of understanding of available resources, and also an interesting comment from an NGO about about support for high school leavers with disability. And are we aware of this? I'm not quite with that one. I don't know if anyone wants to help there, but yeah, sorry, yes, I beg your pardon. Yes, and part of the support also includes an array of external providers, some of whom we recommend and some of whom we don't because of the extra cost involved. So we need to be mindful of the situation that our students are in, and of course connect them with the services that are right for them. So perhaps we could, in the interest of time, we could zip on to the next slide, please, Tim. And
just before we do, if it's okay, I just want to address just a couple of earlier questions before we get too far. So just also wanting to respond to some of the webinar chat. One question that came through was wanting to know if if people with disability are changing over time as a percentage of total students. In other words, yes, the raw numbers have gone up, but if you will, what's the slice of the pie? So I can answer that. Participation of people with disability is both going up in real numbers and proportionally. So you go back about 10 years and about 3% of all students were people with disability. Then it moved up to 4%. It's now sitting to around 7%. So we're seeing both types of participation that you want to see in equity research, not only the numbers of students, but the proportional numbers of students. So that's really good. The second question that was asked is, will the research look at the ability of students with a disability to actually participate in campus life? And yes, absolutely. We're going to be looking across not only the things that immediately spring to people's minds, such as curriculum support or technological support for these students, or indeed physical support for these students on campus, but we're also looking at systemic support. In other words, just the way the whole system is set up, the way the university's bureaucracy is set up, can that assist students? And we're also looking at the social aspects. The social being not only can students participate in the social life of a university, and the question here was asking is there a link between that and retention? Absolutely, we know there is. If a student feels like they belong at the institution, they're more likely to stick. But it's also in terms of attitudes, attitudinal attitudes, feeling by people who don't have disability, looking at students who do and feeling that they belong as well. A lot of questions also have raised the issue about online. We have a particular focus online, and again, just to tag on to that idea of social, online study for students, some students with disability, solves certain issues, but then creates other issues in the form of isolation. So that's a particular focus. And the final thing before I move on is someone said, has the NDIS had an impact on the above? Short answer, it's too early to tell, but we're specifically looking at the intersection of people now coming through with NDIS plans and how they transition from that into higher education and how that can be potentially complex for them. So, sorry, that's all I wanted to say that, and I'll just move to the next slide for you now, David.
Thank you. That's really useful stuff, Tim, and I think thank you for picking up the point about participation in campus life. I think that's crucial, and a sense of belonging, I agree, underpins people's experience at university. And we were speaking about the array of resources that are available, and the university can provide guidance with accessing these. And so I'd be interested to know, in your opinion, where is the best source of careers information? And please be as courageous as you like with your comments. Is it inside the university? If so, where? Or is it outside?
So Tim, I think this is a poll as well, so we can put the poll up as well if you'd like. You've given some options there. So Jane, do you want to put the poll up, and people can either participate in the poll or chat to us through the chat box. So the poll has gone up, and the choices are Career Office, Disability Support Office, Lecturer, Tutor, Work Integrated Learning Office, and other sources not listed. So we'll collate all of those and put it as a part of the, when we put the presentation up, the information that we present to everybody.
And there's some chat there as well about universities struggling to provide equitable outside, or non-extracurricular experiences for students, especially distance students, whether or not people have disability. That's a key challenge of online learning.
Okay, we might stop the poll now. Jane, are you happy to stop the poll and publish it? Okay, people have said Careers Office, 49%, Disability Support Office, 22%, Lecturer, 0%, Tutor Work Integrated Learning Office, 6%, and other sources not listed, 23%.
Yeah, so a significant amount of support coming from other parts of the university or outside the university altogether. Please feel free to chat information about those non-university sources to us. But I think what this shows us is that while almost half of people go to the Careers Office for information, it's the quality of the information that they receive is important. And whether or not people feel comfortable going there, a significant number of students we've seen, or a significant amount of opinion indicates that people are more comfortable consulting with disability support providers about careers education matters. And there are very interesting and very valid reasons for that as well. And I think one of the issues to interrogate in the research project is the extent to which these typically separate domains of disability support and careers education can be successfully joined. Indeed, the experience through the USEP program, I think, is demonstrating that that's a very useful partnership. And at Swinburne with the Accessibility Hub, our relationship with the accessibility services area, as it's called here, is a crucial part of students feeling comfortable coming to this service because they feel that they will be understood. So unless there are comments or questions about that, we might zip to the next slide, Tim, which is an invitation from both of us to take part in our national consultation. So please keep your eyes on AdSet, where we'll be inviting you to take part in surveys, in discussions later this year. And we're both providing different results. Tim, I'm going to invite you to pop back in at this stage. The project that I'm working on has the very deliberate deliverable of an open access toolbox containing guidelines, activities, connections, resources for all universities to use. And the best way of sharing this, because here I need to recall the point, Tim, that you drew on earlier, is that campus life is a crucial part of the success of any initiative. We can have targeted services, but it seems likely, and this is what I'd be interested to get data on, it seems likely that uptake, that experience of those services is influenced a great deal by the culture of the organisation that provides them. That is what's going to make people feel safe to take part in the services that are provided. We also know from the literature that students with disability typically are very low users of services that are provided for them.
Just jumping in there.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So going forward, what David and I have agreed to do, because we are aware we cannot do this survey without both people with disability and those that support them. And so in their own way have very lived and real experiences of either having disability or supporting students. We're also aware that people have exhaustion and there are so many things that impose upon your life. So rather than us independently sending out surveys, we've joined together. That means that we'll be sending one survey to students and asking them to give us their thoughts, advice, feedback and insights, and we'll be sending one joint survey to staff as well. This also means then that we can also do comparative across. So for instance, in my point of view, from my perspective, I'm very interested to know what challenges or issues or positive experiences students with disability in regional Australia face, but that needs to be contextualised against students with disability as a whole. So absolutely, we're really asking you to support our research over this 12 months. We can't do it without you. We really need to do it with you, but we will try and make it as painless as possible.
Excellent.
David, anything to add, Dave?
Look, I think that rounds things off very nicely. Thank you. We look forward to being in touch, and as Tim said, we cannot do this without you, and we look forward to working with you to help progress these issues and to make a difference to our policymakers in Canberra, we hope, as well as to our own organisations. So I think we might be heading back to Darlene. I think you've got some questions there.
I encourage people to ask any questions. The feed has been quite enormous, so it is going to be difficult for me to go back and work through them. But if you've got questions at this point of time, add them to the question pod and I'll ask them, the chat pod. And remember to put all panellists and attendees. Tim, I was wondering, did you want to run your poll while we're waiting for some questions, or is that gone past now?
Is that the poll regarding categories?
Categories, yeah.
Yeah, that would be fine. The reason I didn't put it was because the new categories have come out, so in some ways it's become a little bit redundant, but I'm happy to have it sent out.
No, that's fine.
Yeah.
Yep, okay. Okay, so yeah, I'm just trying to work my way through the questions. There was a question in regards to using the term university versus higher education providers. Did you guys want to?
I've responded to that already.
Oh,
I've said just a slip of the tongue. I fall into university. We do mean higher education providers. Yeah.
Very good. We received a lot of questions prior to the webinar, which we're not probably going to get to today, but Tim's offered to, ultimately they will be answered throughout either they were answered throughout the presentation, or we'll look at them at the end of this presentation and to see how we go.
We've had one question come through. Where can those who'd like to contribute to the research register their interest? Darlene, is it possible for them to register their interest through AdSet, or if that's not possible, could you make David and my contact details available and we can keep a list of registers? We'd rather someone got the request 2 or 3 times than not at all.
It's Jane here, Tim. Should I can just adapt the survey now to have a information box in there. Would that do?
That would be wonderful. So anybody that says that they would like to, and if they could just indicate whether they would like to participate as a staff member, a student, or both.
Okay.
Okay. I'm having a difficulty time finding the questions through all the chatter in response to the answers. So we've never had this experience. We've had so many people providing feedback generally throughout.
It's Jane again. David and Tim, if you want to scroll through and see if there's any there that you would like to answer.
Well, we also have some pre-submitted questions, don't we? So shall we work our way through those as well?
Yep, I can do that. Okay. Some of these questions you might have already answered. So there was a one around international students. What opportunities are there for international students with disability within these studies? I presume, are you looking at mostly domestic students?
We are looking at mostly just domestic students, and that's because the reality of the sector is that 97 to 98% of students with disability in the sector are domestic. However, we're not going to exclude international students. What I meant from that comment is it's an acknowledgement that the findings we will make and the things that we will discover, we have to qualify that this is this is indicative of the domestic student experience. Just the numbers mean that we can't necessarily generalise and extrapolate to international students, but international students will absolutely be invited to participate.
Mm. I might add there too that that for my project, the international student experience is very relevant, and that the employability challenges there are simply a variation on a theme. They're different but very much related challenges that international students face. And from a careers education point of view, I think the toolbox and the guidelines and the annual summit that we hope we'll be able to use at the end of this year to help universities provide resources and services will deliberately include international students.
Yeah.
I'm just going to jump in on a couple more questions that were asked in the chat thing. One, there's the brief discussion around social capital or word of mouth, in other words, finding jobs afterwards. And I just responded that yes, social capital is increasingly important, and then there was a response saying social capital for students with disability can be very challenging, so therefore better supports and resources need to be put into link them to industry. The comment I want to make on that is this is something that universities need to acknowledge more. I conceptualise it of upstream and downstream. Upstream are things that happen before the student even enrolls in the university, and downstream are things that happen to the student after they exit the university. And some universities still conceive their responsibility or their ability to impact and support students as just happening in that midstream. In other words, once the student hits our gates, up until the point that they walk out our gates, that's where we're going to engage with the student. And we know that's not the case. We know that there are things universities can, and in many cases are doing, well before the student engages with the universities to raise their aspirations and build their academic capabilities. That's a conversation that we've been having for some time. We're now increasingly having that conversation, and this is where David's research comes in about what we need to do to help that student. And it's, again, I'm going to pass over to David here because he knows it much better than I do. It's not just about saying, go here and speak to this person, but it's about the capabilities that you build within the person. Is that right, David?
Yes, indeed. No, that's really nicely put. Thank you. And it speaks directly to another question that we have here about whether or not focusing on inherent requirements is a good enough way to communicate to students about what employers want from them on graduation. And I think what employers expect, we live in an employer's market, is a much richer communication from students than that. And the good news for the students is that employability, this psychosocial notion of self, of how you understand the world and how you see yourself in it, is best informed by deep engagement with a student's core discipline. That's where transferable skills come from, and and that process marries those skills and those interests with the perennial career development question, which is what does the student want to do with what they've learned? So the answer is not to become an accountant, but what kind of an accountant, or what sort of organisation do you want to use your skills to support? People have answers for these questions if we create the right space for them. And so I think, therefore, we need to create the right kind of space by allowing people a sense of belonging to it.
Another question was raised in the chat around the notion of identification, whether we're talking about the old categories or the new ones that will be coming in, or more importantly, how students themselves. I just wanted to make an observation around that, because this is something that is very challenging in the area of critical disability studies. And some people refer to it, and I refer to it as the recognition redistribution paradox. I come from a social science background, I come from a social theory background, and so I, if you will, naturally fall into the redistribution side of things, which is not talking here about disability in specific now, but saying there are certain people who in society are disadvantaged, that there are social and economic barriers that are put in front of them. And the job of good policy, good public policy, is to remove, or if they can't remove, reduce those barriers. What that breeds into you, and that is from the heart, and that is a positive thing to do. However, it does breed into, sometimes approaches two things. First, it creates deficit conversations. In other words, it sees the problems. It doesn't see the positive. And second, its ultimate aim, whether it expresses it or not, is to efface the difference. In other words, this person is poor. We want to enact public policies so that they are no longer poor. And that's why it's called a redistribution approach, because you're saying you don't have something, we want to give you, society needs to be more equal. But increasingly, and from the late 80s onwards, there was a greater awareness of what they called the recognition side, and that was to say whether you're talking about being Indigenous, whether you're talking about being female in a male environment, whether you're talking about having a disability. This is a point of identification. It is not a deficit. This is something that you want to explore and embrace and problematize and make interesting. And so the recognition side says, I don't want to efface or make go away disability. I actually want to champion it and applaud it and support it. Institutions have to work out how to reconcile those two things. It is complicated because you can't completely ignore social and economic barriers for people with disability, but you can't become consumed and assessed by them. And so what I'm saying going forward is that very much affects every time we talk about, and you can probably see that this is something that I keep returning to because it's very important to me, particularly as a person who does not identify as having disability. And so I'm aware that I'm talking about categories and putting categories upon people, some of whom feel comfortable about these categories and some of whom do not. And in this, we want to explore this further in our research.
Excellent. Thank you for that, Tim. There's another question here around universities often present themselves as a teaching institution, not as career providers. Is there any suggestions that how you can integrate the two, better within our universities?
Well, can I start with that? So I think they've long been both, but I think that there are different opinions about where the locus of careers education is in the institution. Some decision makers or senior management staff would argue, well, this is the business of the careers office, or no, it's not. They check resumes. This is the business of faculty. Or this is the business of our internship office or professional placement unit. I think the answer is that everyone has a stake in it. We already contribute to career development in different ways. Integrating it is, recognising that and integrating it is, seems like me to be a wise thing to do.
Anything from you, Tim, on that question?
No, I'll leave that David.
That's okay. There's another question, which I'm sorry I missed earlier, was in the question and answer pod, is can you please go over your definition of meaningful work? What you mean by
yes, so meaningful work is work that the student wants, that is related to their degree, typically because of the transactional approach that government takes to the employability of graduates with disability. Any job will do, and so I don't think it's, to give an example, I don't think it's particularly meaningful for somebody with a degree to be doing menial work. It does get that person off the unemployment statistic for a short while, perhaps. But it's not meaningful for the student, and I think that, as with any other student, a person with disability should have the right to aim to be, or at least to start with the idea that they can be the architect of their own career. That's not the same as naked entitlement. We're all smart in different ways, and we all have capabilities, and we all have limitations. And I might want to be a doctor, but I'm not smart in that way. And so this is not an argument for entitlement, other than the entitlement to be able to engage with and construct plans that progress your aspirations and help you confront your aspirations instead of being told that you belong over here.
Okay. We've also had a question, David, about career awareness from high school, primary school onwards, so that's a stronger base of skills and awareness of work. I know that's probably going to be that's a bigger question from your fellowship, but how far will you go down as far as understanding what career support, advice and stuff students with disabilities have got throughout their time?
Okay. No, that's a good question. So thank you. So my project focuses on the decisions that universities make to support their existing students. I think further down the track, I think there's scope for investing that question that you raise more specifically. But certainly, and I hope I'm not about to make people's skin crawl, because I'm not saying that we should be teaching careers education to primary school children unless we do it in a sophisticated way that is married with a sense of a young person's sense of the world as a fascinating place which they can explore safely and with a sense of belonging. I think that's the best start that we could give them, in my humble opinion.
That's brilliant. Thank you for that. There's a few questions that we had come through around adjustments within universities. Somebody wrote, why do each university have their own policies and procedures for adjustments and not many appear to be student-centred? I don't know if that's something that you're able to answer at this stage, Tim, or...
So it's interesting, that question has two parts to it. The first part, there's a reason, and that is because that universities have different approaches, because the focus should be on the functional adjustment required. The functional adjustment, in other words, it's not about this person is in a wheelchair or this person has a learning difficulty. It's this person is a better oral learner, or this person needs, or this person works better with certain lighting in the room. So you focus on the functional adjustment. And given that there are so many variables in terms of not only the person with disability, but the institution, the actual built social and technological infrastructure of the institution, you do need individual institutions to adopt. However, the second part of the question is the critical one, and this is what we want to explore. By all means, have individual approaches to student support, but these approaches should be based upon best practice. Best practice should be shared between the institutions. You should not be constantly trying to reinvent the wheel. And I'm going to be very careful, because I bet a lot of people are logged in right now and they do demonstrate best practice, and they're probably right now listening and saying, I'm trying to get this information out to other sectors, and that's what we need to work on. And that's why David and I were really eager to engage with you early, so that we don't run around and say, you should be doing this and you should be doing that. Instead, we're saying, this is something good that's happening that other people should be aware of.
That's brilliant. Thank you for that. Now, looking at the time, we're coming to the end. I'm going to hand over to Sarah in a minute just to round up the presentation and to thank our speakers. Just before we do that, I wanted to give a plug for the next webinar for ADSET. That will be in April on Autism Acceptance Day, and it will be a student panel of students who are currently at TAFE and University studying, students with on the autism spectrum. So now, Sarah, I'll hand over to you to wrap us up.
Oh, thank you, Darlene. I think you'll agree that that was two terrific presentations, and the engagement from the audience was phenomenal. I'm looking at the chat at the moment, 148 people who have contributed, 149 now. So I'd just like to take the opportunity to thank David and Tim for a really interesting presentation on both their projects. And again, just to flag that both David and Tim are National Centre Fellows, and that this is actually the National Centre is funded by the Department of Education, Employment, Skills and Training. So the department is facilitating this really innovative and cutting edge research. For those of you who aren't already subscribed to the National Centre newsletter, I suggest you hop onto the website and get subscribed and follow what we do here. But thank you, David and Tim, and thank you, ADSET, for facilitating this terrific webinar, and we look forward to partnering with you again in the future.
Thanks, Sarah, and thank you everybody for joining us today. And I do apologise for not managing the questions well. I normally have someone, when there's going to be a lot of questions, I'll have someone kind of cutting and pasting for me, but who would have thought we'd had such interest? I should have known. What a great sector we work in. So have a great day, everybody, and we'll chat again in April.